Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Tonight, I'm joined by my friend, Dee Pierce, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends. How are you this evening, Dee?
I'm doing fine. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
And I see Steve Wolfbrandt is here.
Oh, very good. Very good. I'm glad Steve is here. So, our topics for tonight are bullying China, also a deal for peace, weaponizing the dollar, and our fourth topic is West Asia chaos. So that should be an interesting set of topics today. Lana's here also, and she says hello all.
Hello, Lana.
So,
Yeah, I said I'm sharing, and I think it's important for us to share as much as we can, build up the
I do
audience.
too. So I think I'll start off by sharing, at least on Facebook. Excuse my whistling while I share.
Okay, Lana said she shared. She says, yes, I shared on Facebook. Good reminder. Thank you, Lana.
Thank you, Lana. Okay, here we are. So, I'm going to begin with our first topic, bullying China.
Yeah, Lana says, D, I said hello out loud as if you can hear me. Tired. Well, thank you, Lana.
This comes from a piece by Michael Whitney, Washington's attempts to bully China will only backfire. So, this was written on January 11th, 2025. It's a big, long one. I'll try not to read the whole thing. Can we have a serious conversation about China? Asks Mike Whitney. Says China is rapidly overtaking the United States in a number of areas that threaten to undermine America's position in the world. Naturally, U.S. leaders and their billionaire backers are concerned about this and have taken steps to remedy the situation. Regrettably, none of these steps include an honest appraisal of the Western economic model that allows the, quote, privileged few, unquote, to skim off too much of their company's profits, leaving insufficient capital to reinvest in productive activity, critical infrastructure, or societal improvement. Chinese policymakers have taken a different approach to this issue, and the results speak for themselves. Standards of living have risen sharply. Poverty has been eradicated. I don't think I'd go that far. The usual statements are that 800 million people have been lifted out, of poverty in recent years. Even if we assume that there were 200 million who were never in poverty, that would still leave about 400 million still in poverty. But going on, standards of living have risen sharply. Poverty has been eradicated. Healthcare is universal. That's certainly better than the United States. Critical infrastructure is top notch. China's getting stronger by the day. Don't take my word for it, says Mike Whitney. Read the economic data yourself. or better still, Google, quote, Chinese cities, unquote, or quote, Chinese high-speed rail, unquote, or quote, Chinese ports, unquote, or quote, Chinese bridges, unquote, etc. See for yourself the miracle that is taking place in China today. In transportation, as Bonnie says. And as we scroll down, we notice this picture of an extremely long, extremely beautiful bridge that has been built by the Chinese. I don't know from where to where. In the lower left-hand corner, there's another extremely impressive bridge. Actually, it's the center left corner. And in the center right corner, there's yet another one. These are incredible scenes of bridges that we are looking at. Each one seems to be a serious monument to the architecture of bridges. This is not merely a story about China's about the meteoric economic rise of China. It's a story about a culture and a civilization that has shaken off a century of imperial humiliation and exploded onto the world stage like no longer civilization, like no other civilization in human history. China's not only a beacon of light in a world that is experiencing paroxysms of violence and genocide on a scale not seen since the Second World War. It also serves as blueprint for a future peaceful coexistence through shared prosperity, economic integration, and a vast infrastructure plan for connecting the continents via a new Silk Road. Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese leaders believe that commerce and connectivity can draw the world closer together, ending the vicious cycle of wars that threaten to annihilate all of humanity. In short, China is pointing the way out of 5 centuries of colonial exploitation to a brighter future where nations and people use free markets to work together and, quote, lift all boats, unquote. I find it interesting that he says, in short, China's pointing the way out of 5 centuries of colonial exploitation to a brighter future where nations and people use free markets to work together and, quote, lift all boats. Free markets. Gee, that doesn't sound like Red China very much, does it?
No, and you still have people thinking that China's in the past. They have no clue of the Chinese economy.
Yeah, they have no clue about what the hell is going on in the Chinese economy now. Look at that beautiful locomotive on that Chinese train. Okay, and the uniforms of what look like the station attendants or the conductors. But their uniforms are a dark red,
Hmm.
and they have cute little hats
Hmm.
and fashionable boots. Did we mention that the Chinese miracle does not require 800 military bases scattered across the planet, or bloody interventions in Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc., or countless coups in foreign capitals, or black ops, 30 wars, and endless psyops aimed at the American people? Russiagate, COVID-19, January 6th, George Floyd, etc. No, China achieved its objectives the old fashioned way through hard work, initiative, innovation, and the support of a government that directs capital to projects that promote the collective interests of the Chinese people. I guess I have to ask the question, was the last part of this promoting the collective interests of the Chinese people? Uh, was that part of the old-fashioned way that we in the United States used to pursue? I'm not sure how much we ever promoted the collective interests of the American people. I suppose the closest we came to that was probably in the Roosevelt administration. But imagine a government that boldly articulates its vision for the future and then assists the workers and industries that make that dream a reality. That's what China has done, and that's what China is doing today. Take a look at this excerpt from an article by Ron Unz. Of course, he is the person who heads up the blog that has these countless articles that we've been going through, in many of our programs. Take a look at this excerpt from an article by Ron Unz. The rise of China surely ranks among the most important world developments of the past 100 years. During the 3 decades to 2010, China achieved perhaps the most rapid, sustained rate of economic development in the history of the human species, with its real economy growing almost 40-fold between 1978 and 2010. In 1978, the U.S. economy was 15 times larger. But according to most international estimates, China is now set to surpass America's total economic output within just another few years. Furthermore, the vast majority of China's newly created economic wealth has flowed to ordinary Chinese workers who have moved from oxen and bicycles to the verge of automobiles in just a single generation. And of course, I'd have to add here that very many of those automobiles appear to be electric vehicles. I mean, electric vehicles are exploding right now in China. While median American incomes have been stagnant for almost 40 years, those in China have nearly doubled every decade, with the real wages of workers outside the farm sector rising about 150% over the last 10 years alone. The Chinese of 1980, this is still a long quote from Ron Unz, the Chinese of 1980 were desperately poor compared to Pakistanis, Nigerians, or Kenyans. But today they are several times wealthier, representing more than a tenfold shift in relative income. This is from the book The American Pravda, The Racial Roots of China's Rise, which I believe was published on this blog. Yes. So it's there for the taking if you just follow the link and then click on American Pravda, The Racial Roots of China's Rise. Here is a picture of, I hope this has a caption because no caption. Well, it's a cityscape, but there appears to be the tower that's towering over it appears to be a minaret of sorts. Those are usually associated with Muslim culture. But all of these office buildings look extremely modern, of course. This is a picture from some Chinese city. I wish there was a caption saying which one. More from UNS. A World Bank report recently highlighted the huge drop in global poverty rates from 1980 to 2008. But critics noted that over 100% of that decline came from China alone. The number of Chinese living in dire poverty fell by a remarkable 662 million people, while the impoverished population in the rest of the world actually rose by 13 million people. And although India is often paired with China in the Western media, a large fraction of Indians have actually grown poorer over time. Chinese economic progress is especially impressive when matched against historical parallels. Between 1870 and 1900, America enjoyed unprecedented industrial expansion. During those 30 years, America's real capital income grew by 100%. But over the last 30 years, real per capita income in China has grown more than 1,300%. During the 3 decades to 2010, China achieved perhaps the most rapid sustained rate of economic development in the history of the human species, with its real economy growing almost 40-fold between 1978 and 2010. 1978, America's economy was 15 times larger. But according to most international estimates, China is now set to surpass America's total economic output within just another few years. According to the official economic statistics provided by the CIA World Handbook, China's real productive economy, perhaps the most reliable measure of global economic power, is already more than 3 times larger than that of the US, and also growing far more rapidly. Indeed, according to that important economic metric, China now easily outweighs the combined total of the entire American-led bloc, the United States, the rest of the Anglosphere, the European Union, and Japan. An astonishing achievement. And that quote, ending that quote, that also is from American Pravda, The Racial Roots of China's Rise. And here's a graphic. Large economies by GDP in 2024. Values are in USD, trillions, of dollars. And going from the bottom up, China was 37.07 trillion, the UK 4.3 trillion, Japan 6.57 trillion, India 16.02 trillion, Russia 6.91 trillion, Germany 6.02 trillion, France 4.36 trillion, Indonesia 4.66 trillion, Brazil 4.7 trillion, and the United States 29.17 trillion. Okay, this is in GDP terms, but also measured in purchasing power parity terms, or PPP. So that's why it looks like China is so much larger than the US here. The top 10 contributors to world economic growth from 2023 to 2028. These are based on IMF forecasts, which certainly don't have a Chinese bias. China contributes 22.6% to world economic growth. India, 12.9% to world economic growth. The United States is third at 11.3% contribution to world economic growth. Indonesia, 3.6%, Germany, 2.1%, Turkey, 2.1%, Japan, 1.8%, Brazil, 1.7%, Egypt, 1.7%, and Russia, 1.6%. I suspect that these projections by the IMF are wrong because they no doubt underestimate the contribution to growth that will be made by Russia. I doubt that it's going to be only 1.6% because it's been growing rapidly, and international statistics always tend to, especially IMF statistics, always tend to underestimate the Russian growth. Anyway, the data confirm that Ron Unz's analysis is 100% accurate. According to official figures, real per capita income has risen by a factor of more than 30 since 1978. Annual per capita income now stands at about 22,100, which of course still is much less the United States. Also, life expectancy in China is currently higher than the United States, which with China's average life expectancy around 78.2% compared to the US's lower figure, which varies depending on source, but is generally around 77.5 years. Of course, when it comes to life expectancy, the trend line for China is much, much higher than the trend line for the United States. Even now, you can see the slope of the trend line for China is still very sharp, even though they've already exceeded us in life expectancy. So Mike Whitney says, I guess he's still quoting from Ron Unz, a monumental achievement. Quote, China has achieved significant success in poverty reduction, lifting nearly 800 million people out of poverty since the start of its economic reforms in 1978, contributing to a large portion of the global reduction in extreme poverty. This achievement is largely attributed to rapid economic growth and targeted government policies aimed at rural development and access to education and healthcare, unquote. Basic public health service package is provided to all Chinese residents free of charge. Ordinary people without an appointment can see a specialist on the same day, free. Here's another quote. I'm not sure where this quote is from, whether it's still from Ron Unz or another source, but it says, according to recent surveys, based on reported happiness levels, people in China tend to report higher level of happiness compared to the United States, with some studies even ranking China as one of the happiest countries globally. 95% of Chinese express satisfaction with their government, while only 35% of Americans express satisfaction with their government in Harvard and Gallup polls. And here's a quote from the Harvard Gazette. Levels of government public opinion. Survey team found that compared to public opinion patterns in the US and China, there was very high satisfaction with the central government. In 2016, the last year the survey was conducted, 95.5% of respondents were either relatively satisfied, quote unquote, or highly satisfied with Beijing. Contrast to these findings, Gallup reported in January of this year that their latest polling on U.S. citizen satisfaction with the American federal government revealed only 38% of respondents were satisfied with the federal government. That was as of, I guess, January 2024. It's not clear. It refers to this year, but it's not clear. So on the issues that matter most to working people, wages, life expectancy, poverty reduction, healthcare, and overall happiness, China's leaps and bounds above the U.S. As far as education, the same rule applies. China beats the U.S. hands down. This is from Quora. Quote, in China, there's a strong cultural emphasis on education and academic achievement. Families often prioritize educational success, viewing it as a pathway to upward mobility. Parental involvement. Chinese parents tend to be highly involved in their children's education, often providing additional tutoring and support outside of school. Curriculum focus. The Chinese education system places a strong emphasis on math and science, which are prioritized in standardized testing. This focus can lead to higher proficiency in these subjects. Standardized testing, high-stakes exams create a competitive environment that motivates students to perform well academically. The quote continues with a discussion of teaching methods. Emphasis on rigor. Chinese education often emphasizes rote forms of memorization and practice, particularly in mathematics, which can lead to higher performance in standardized assessments. Teacher expectations. Teachers in China typically have high expectations for their students, which can foster a strong work ethic and academic discipline. Investment in education. In recent years, the Chinese government has made significant investments in education, particularly in urban areas, leading to improved facilities and resources. Socioeconomic factors. Access to resources. In many cases, students in urban areas of China have greater access to educational resources, including tutoring and extracurricular programs compared to their American counterparts. Quora, unquote. Can we definitively say that China has the superior educational system? That the U.S. should emulate that system, ensure our children can read, write, and find gainful employment that will increase their chances of prosperity and happiness in the future? Yes, we can. Let me also say that living standards in the United States are falling due to income inequality, stagnant wages, and chronic inflation, that the gap between rich and poor is widening, that the middle class is shrinking, and that poverty, food insecurity, and homelessness are getting progressively worse. Yes, 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 okay, and yes. The only thing I would say there that I have a little bit of a question about is wages are stagnant, but is inflation really chronic in the United States? I don't know. Inflation in the United States was low for a very long time. We had inflation, of course, after COVID, post-COVID. We certainly had sharp inflation, but how long did that last? For a little more than 2 years? I would not say that we have chronic inflation right now. But anyway, I think people are going to disagree a bit on that. Here's home ownership in the United States and China. In China, home ownership seems to be at 85% roughly. Wow. In the United States, it's down around 60%, maybe a little less. Very few Chinese have a mortgage. If we look at it in percent terms, maybe 10% of the people have a mortgage. In the United States, something like 60% of the people have a mortgage. Well, I guess I don't quite understand those bars, because the bars on the right mention specifically mortgage free. About 70% of the people are mortgage free in China, and about 25% of the people are mortgage free here in the United States. So I don't know what the middle set of bars is actually measuring then. But I think the point is made. Maybe 4 times the number of people are mortgage free in China than are free here in the United States. Well, I guess 3 times, not 4 times. Close to 3 times. Poverty in the United States increased in 2022 and 2023, 12.4% 2022, up from 7.8% in 2021. That's quite an increase in poverty, isn't it? And in 2023, up to 12.9%. Homelessness in the United States is a growing crisis, with record high numbers of people experiencing homelessness in 2024. Food insecurity in 2023, 13.5% of households in the U.S. were food insecure, which is a higher rate than in 2022. Well, I could go on with this, but okay, I think I'm going to skip the rest, or most of the rest. You get the point. Here's something very striking. Of course, growth is a meaningless metric if the revenue is not devoted to productive activity or improvements in society. In China, a significant portion of profits are recycled into public infrastructure, like a railway network. It's high speed, which presently extends over 47,000 kilometers. In comparison, there are 2 rail lines in the United States that can reach the 200 kilometer per hour mark, 124 miles per hour, which is the unofficial minimum speed at which a train can be considered to be high-speed rail. So there are only 2 lines here in the United States. There are 47,000 kilometers of it in China. China's fastest train is the Shanghai the maglev train, which has a top speed of 431 kilometers per hour. That's 268 miles per hour. It's the world's first high-speed commercial train line.
Is that the one that hangs and
No, the one that hangs is a monorail,
oh,
and that's different. This, regular rails, but the speed of it is extremely fast, and the locomotives are very sleek, okay, in their design. In 2008, in China, there were 118 kilometers of high-speed rail. In 2023, there were 42,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, and there's a graphic showing high-speed rail going all across the country. Very, very impressive, to say the least. Okay, anyway, you're getting the point. The record of progress in China is just fantastic. It's also becoming a technological superpower, okay, as well. Of course, it's a huge superpower in trade. Now, here's the bottom line. It's that the U.S. sees the rise of China as an existential threat that must be countered by all means necessary. This is why the U.S. is hectoring China in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. That is why all the coverage of China in the Western press is hopelessly one-sided and negative. That is why the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was arrested 2 years ago at the Vancouver International Airport. That is why Washington is building anti-China coalitions in the Asia Pacific. And that is why President Joe Biden just escalated his sanctions on microchips into a full-blown technology war on China. Check out Arno Bertrand's brief summary of last week's piece on Bloomberg. Biden to further limit NVIDIA AI chip exports in final push. Here's a quote from Bloomberg. This is crazy. Biden's last act in the chip war before leaving office is to literally build the global technological Berlin Wall. Extremely easy to predict that this will backfire dramatically. Let's think this through. First of all, the heart of this initiative is the U.S. now dividing the world in three. Close allies with unfettered access to AI chips and similar advanced U.S. technology. Adversaries with little to no access. The rest of the world with restricted access on certain conditions. Basically a deal that asks them to choose between the U.S. and China. Continuing on with the quote. Let's be clear, the U.S. is now dropping all pretense it's somehow about either military or, quote, dual use. It's all about raw technological dominance. The goal, spelled out plainly in the Bloomberg article, is, quote, concentrating AIT development in friendly nations and getting businesses around the world to align with American standards, unquote. Problems with this approach are numerous and obvious. China, already investing massively in domestic semiconductor development, will only accelerate these efforts. You're not stopping their progress. You're guaranteeing they'll build their own economic ecosystem, and other adversary nations will literally have no other choice than to buy from China. For, quote, the rest of the world tier, you're forcing a choice they've all reportedly said they didn't want to have to make, choosing between the U.S. and China. But here's the reality. It's not even a difficult choice. On one side, you have highly restricted U.S. technology with strict oversight and caps on computing power. On the other, you have open, accessible, and considerably cheaper Chinese technology like open source DeepSeek, and a partner that's already their largest trading relationship. For most of these countries, the choice is obvious, and it's not the one the U.S. wants them to make. Betting that countries will accept U.S. technological oversight and restrictions rather than pursue alternatives is properly delusional. Even U.S. countries recognize this is self-defeating. NVIDIA's statement is telling. This won't, quote, reduce the risk of misuse, but would threaten economic growth and U.S. leadership, unquote. They understand that fragmenting the global market will ultimately hurt American competitiveness, not enhance it. Ultimately, what this will, this is all a long quote, by the way, folks, from Bloomberg. Ultimately, what this will lead to is a wall that will increasingly isolate U.S. technology, while the rest of the world moves on. That's the irony. In trying to maintain technological dominance, the U.S. is accelerating its own isolation. By forcing countries to choose, it's creating exactly the conditions that will drive them to Chinese alternatives. This isn't containing China's technological rise. It's hastening the emergence, excuse me a second, of a parallel technological ecosystem that the U.S. won't be able to control. And ultimately, with the sheer dynamism, China, and the much faster growth of the global south, this parallel ecosystem is likely to become the dominant one versus a calcified and the closed West. This was tweeted out by Arno Bertrand, who, if you haven't heard of him, is a billionaire, many times over, very rich. I don't know if he's worth over $100 billion, but I think he probably approaches that. He's very rich. What's clear is that this foolish attempt to bully China is going to blow up in Washington's face and accelerate America's rate of decline. That seems like a pretty fair outcome to me. What goes around comes around. Here's a picture of someone tweeted a picture of a shithole country, which is the American flag going up in flames. Okay, there's a little more to the article. Okay, I won't go into, but you are getting the point. The title was, I'm sure you've gotten the point by now, Washington's attempts to bully China will only backfire. When it comes to bullying China, we are far too little and far too late. We need to end it. We need to back off. We need to find a way to live with China and find our rightful place in the world. We have to remember is that China is 1.4 million people. We are 340 million people. It's only fair that China should exceed us in total production, in manufacturing, in almost all these other fields, because it has far more people to call on. And when it mobilized, its educational system and all the other systems we went over here, it created the capability to catch up to us and surpass us. And if we simply want to be the equal per capita to China, we have a lot of work to do. And we have a lot of growing to do. And even if improve our educational system, and even if we get to the point where per capita we're equal to China, we're still going to be 4 times smaller than China. And we're going to have to cope with that, as well. So let's look at your comments now.
And I was going to say, going back to the 90s, remember when the corporations were sending manufacturing over to China?
Yes, when they were sending American manufacturing over to China.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a lot of comments. Alana says, I shared to Facebook. Good reminder. Steve says, hi, Alana. Alana says, D, I said hello out loud as if you can hear me. She said, tired. Steve says, these pictures of Chinese are amazing. Have you seen those pictures of Chinese? Are amazing. Have you seen them? He says Chinese cities. Sorry, yeah, I have seen pictures of Chinese cities. They are amazing. Pretty sure China is the one bullying, says Friar Steve. Taiwan is fine just the way they are sovereign. Friar Steve! Friar Steve! Go look at the State Department on our relations to China. Taiwan is not sovereign. According to the State Department itself, Taiwan is a province of China. Friar Steve says, we will stand with Taiwan. The Communist Party of China's pure corruption and stifling of freedom without U.S. markets. China's communist government collapse. Friar Steve, you are being ridiculous. You are ignoring reality. I mean, go take a look at some of the live streams of Cyrus Jansen. He'll give you the real picture of China. There are a number of other people who will also give you the real picture of China. There are many, many Americans who are doing business in China now and who just show you everyday affairs in China.
Exactly. And there's people that have moved to China and they feel freer in China than here. Now, if you're a person that loves guns, that's going to be a different situation because people don't have guns in China.
Yeah,
but otherwise, if guns aren't an issue in your life,
Okay, I didn't read out the last sentence in the comment by Fire Steve says, without U.S. markets, China's communist government will collapse.
Oh, please.
No, definitely not going to happen, Friar Steve. Why won't it happen? Because of BRICS and because of the Belt and Road Initiative and because China is creating its own markets through the progress that is taking place in BRICS. That's why China started the BRI. That's why they got into BRICS in the first place. And over a period of now 20 years or so, or a little less than 20 years, they are building an economic ecosystem that doesn't include U.S. markets. Of course, they'd like to still have the U.S. markets, but if we choose to isolate ourselves from China, okay, and its markets, in the end, we're going to be isolating ourselves to most of the world, whereas China's free market is going to include most of the world. Right, Steve says China's economy will collapse if U.S. closes our markets to their cheap goods.
That's not true. We only amount to 3%. 3%. It's not much.
The 3% of the population, you mean, right?
Yeah, 3% of when it comes to trade and stuff. That if our markets left China, like we closed off China, it doesn't matter because there is other people, there's other countries. They're not dependent on us.
Yeah, and as far as just population is concerned, I think that 8.5 billion people, okay, in the world. So if we had 1 billion people, we'd still be only 12.5% of the world, and we've got 1/3 of 1 billion people. So roughly, our population is 3 point something or 4% of the world. That's all it is.
And we're not making people healthy here.
Yes, and markets are expanding in many other nations of the world much more rapidly than our markets are expanding.
Right. So they don't need us. It's nice to have friends. It's nice to be friends with the US, but they're not dependent on us.
Yes, they don't need us, and not only don't they need us, we need them. We need their markets for our goods, and we have to find a way to produce goods that will create a demand in their market. And why can't we even see Chinese EVs? A friend in Costa Rica says they're everywhere, and they have some great humanoid robots. That, of course, is very interesting. Okay, I've heard that they have the capability to sell EVs here if they want to for $5,500. Of course, they cannot offer their EVs here because of the tariffs that have been placed on them. Robert Clemens said, let me say that China's biggest problem is not to do anything the United States did and was to do the one-child policy. I'm not sure what you said there, Robert. Joe, did this article say anything about the problem that China has now? No, because its point was to show that our attempts to bring China down aren't going to work. So it didn't go into the problems. It went into China's successes and made clear how successful they are. And it is really astonishing. And the ignorance here in America of how much progress they've had is just shocking. Our people don't understand that at all. I should have said the problems China is having now. Lana said, the middle bars are those that have a mortgage. The right is without a mortgage. Thank you, Lana. Steve Wolfbrand says, Chinese space program also taking off. Yes, I understand that that's true also. Steve, I am also annoyed by our lack of Chinese EVs for sale. I'm annoyed too. I'd love to be able to buy a new car for $5,500. I might be able to finance that sucker. Lana says, since I just sat through 3 hours of training with H&R Block on Saturday, some of it was about green energy tax credits. Hybrids don't get you a tax credit. EVs do, but must be built. Or at, I think the point is must be built here in the United States. Steve says Elon should buy China. Um, uh, uh, Otherwise, we are effed. I hate to tell you, Steve, but Elon isn't rich enough to buy China. China is rich enough to buy Elon.
Yeah.
Because Elon is still worth only $300 billion, but China is holding trillions of dollars worth of U.S. treasuries. So who is it who can buy whom? Robert Coleman, anybody hear about the problems that real estate companies like Country Garden and Evergrande are having now as both companies are going or are bankrupt with half-built apartment complexes? No, I haven't heard about that. Lana says at least finished assembly in U.S., Canada, and Mexico have some agreements. Why can't we have a partnership with China for these cars? It's infuriating. It is infuriating, and I hope that Trump ends that, but I don't believe he's going to. Brian Lana says, Robert, where are those located? Both companies are located in China and have built cities that are vacant. Yes. Robert says, China has a declining population. Yes, it does. It's wanted to have a declining population because it has thought it was overpopulated. Its population declined from 1.5 billion to 1.4 billion. I think the Chinese like that, actually. And Robert says, hence the robots. Joe, look at China bullying several countries in the South China Sea. I know it is bullying several countries in the South China Sea. But you have to ask, why is it bullying the countries in the South China Sea? Or maybe it's because they're doing things that they've been goaded by the United States to do that are unfriendly to China. Anyway, Lana says, we have a declining population too, an aging population. People who can have babies aren't having as many. Well, we don't have a declining population yet. And the reason why we don't have a declining population, Lana, is because of all those migrants who are coming here from south of the border. They've been responsible for our increasing population. As I said, we now have roughly 340 million people, and that's the reason why. Rob says, I'm annoyed this article only said what is good about China and not what is wrong in China. Well, the point of it was not to give a balanced view of China. It was to argue why the United States won't be successful in bullying China. Steve Wolfbrand says, funniest show yet. And Lana says, yep, they will be deported. Yeah, maybe, I agree, maybe Trump is going to deport them, but maybe he won't be so successful at actually deporting them. Okay, Dee, let's move on to the second article on a comprehensive peace. You want me to put that up?
Yes, please.
Okay, you got it. It's a relatively short article, but very, very important. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
A comprehensive deal for peace in the Middle East. Jeffrey T. Sachs and Ehud Shapiro, January 11th, 2025. Mm. And the photo shows the destruction in Gaza Strip during a 2023 war.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
okay,
show
so
the picture there.
horrible.
Horrible destruction, right?
The key to peace in the Middle East is the security of all state and people in the region. The arrival of a new presidency in the United States brings the opportunity for a comprehensive peace deal. The security of all states and people would mean the disarming of the militant non-state forces. It would mean the normalization of diplomatic relations among all nations in the region. It would mean the people of Palestine have their own sovereign state alongside Israel. It would mean the protection of the territorial integrity and stability of neighboring countries, Lebanon and Syria. It would mean the commitment of all countries to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region. And it would mean that all economic sanctions would be lifted as part of the normalization of diplomatic relations and as a great stimulus to economic development. Such such a comprehensive deal would be in the national security interest of every nation. It would enable all parties to achieve their legitimate aims. Importantly, it would also be line up with international law, therefore supported by the United Nations and all its states. The sheer majority of people in the Middle East and in the world yearn for peace, yet a violent extremist minority in Israel and the Arab world oppose peace. Mercenary armies fight for the spoils of war, and some arms makers stoke the conflicts. Some opponents of peace dream of restoring ancient empires in the flagrant violation of today's realities. Many millions of people are simply terrified, believing that the other side is an implacable foe out to kill them. False narratives of hatred feed these fears. To those in great fear, let us recall the wisdom of President John F. Kennedy, who declared 60 years ago, "Indeed, across the gulfs and barriers that now divide us, we must remember that there are no permanent enemies. Hostility today is a fact, but it is not a ruling law. The supreme reality of our time is our indivisibility as children of God and our common vulnerability on this planet." Kennedy's confidence in peace enabled the US and the Soviet Union to sign and implement the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Today, the quote, art of the deal could avert a world war. The Middle East is known as the cradle of civilization because of its vast and unique history and its gifts to world civilization. The three monotheistic faiths are all born in this region, and they all preach and yearn for peace. With the Middle East today at real risk of nuclear conflagration, the moment has arrived for a comprehensive peace deal. The world's political leaders and religious leaders have peace within their reach. A comprehensive peace deal in 2025 should include 7 measures. 1. An immediate UN-mandated ceasefire across all fronts of the conflict, including Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Iran, and the immediate release of hostages and prisoners of war across all entities. The admission of a sovereign state of Palestine as 194th UN member state on the June 4, 1967 borders with its capital in East Jerusalem. The withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in 1967 with the simultaneous introduction of UN mandated international force and security guarantees to protect all populations. The protection of the territorial integrity and stability of Lebanon and Syria, and the full demilitarization of all non-state forces and withdrawal of all foreign armies from the respective countries. 4. The adoption of updated Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran and the end of all economic and other sanctions on Iran. 5. The termination, including defunding and disarmament of belligerent non-state entities, of all claims or states of belligerency and respect for and acknowledgement of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of every state in the area that it has without excluding the possibility of subsequent territorial adjustments, security arrangements, and cooperative forms of governance agreed by the sovereign parties. 6. The establishment of a regional peace and normalization of diplomatic relations by all Arab and Islamic states with Israel. 7. The establishment of an Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East Sustainable Development Fund to support the reconstruction, economic recovery, and sustainable development of the region. Let us imagine.
Sorry.
Let us imagine the happiness and prosperity that will reverberate across this ancient, proud, and magnificent region if the leaders and people rise to the challenge of peace. Sybil Fair's senior advisor on the Middle East for UNSDSN, assisted centrally on this article.
Okay. Okay, so what do we have to say about this?
The extreme, like the one part of it when we talk about the extremist, that's an issue. But for the most part, well, the thing, but where Israel is today, their mindset, they've got so many on the right, that mindset that wants all the land. They're into that greater Israel. So you have to, I don't know how you would talk to the people, how you would address that you can't expand. You have to stay within your borders.
You have to stay within your borders. Okay, so you need, in other words, it envisions peacekeeping forces. Okay, but it doesn't tell us how we could get to peacekeeping forces that would be numerous enough to keep the peace there.
Hmm. Because you have people that have been brainwashed
Yeah,
that believe that it's theirs, and and you have these, like rabbis, and I mean they teach the younger generation that you know that it's all theirs. Um, so it's just a different reality these people that some of the people are living in.
yeah. The
How do you,
protection of the territorial integrity and stability of Lebanon and Syria, and the full demilitarization of all non-state forces, and withdrawal of all foreign armies from the respective countries. Uh, how are you going to get the Israelis to do that? And how are you going to get uh, Hezbollah to disarm if the Israelis don't do that?
exactly, because they're looking out. Each country is looking out for itself.
Absolutely. Also, number 4 calls for the adoption of an updated joint comprehensive plan of action with Iran and the end of all economic and other sanctions on Iran. What's on the other end of the JCPOA? In other words, what is Iran expected to do? Are they expected to give up uh, uh, their nuclear energy program? Are they expected to give up any of their hypersonic weapons? Uh, okay, it seems to me this is, not just about Iran, but it has to be about Israel too.
Right.
Uh, how can we get Iran to give up the key weapons that it has if we can't get Israel to give up the key weapons that Israel has? Uh, and we can have the withdrawal of Israeli forces from territories occupied in 1967, but even if they were to do that, what do we do about their arms?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do about their 200, uh, uh, 200 to 400? We don't know exactly, how many nuclear weapons they have, but the estimates are at least 200, could be as high, okay, as 400. Uh, and unless Israel comes clean, admits it has those weapons, and opens it up to international inspections, unless they get rid of those weapons, I don't see the Iranians disarming.
Right, because everybody's looking out to protect themselves. Because we know Daniela Weiss and just a whole bunch of people that believe the region is theirs, and they are going to continue doing what they do.
Yes,
So, how, for example, Syria, and you have Lebanon. I mean, the groups already said with Syria they want to, build the settlements in Syria up to Damascus. You have them talking about settlements up to Beirut in Lebanon, and they're not going to stop.
I know they're not going to stop. So this is called the comprehensive deal for peace, but I don't see it as comprehensive, okay, in the sense that it only gives us 7 measures that should be included, but it doesn't go into detail about the other measures that would be necessary to make these 7 measures effective.
Right.
And there are a lot of other things that has to be gone into to do that. Now I understand that Jeff Sachs and his colleague were trying to give us something short to read, an outline of what has to be done. But okay, I don't see this as a comprehensive outline for negotiations. I mean, I think I see it as a statement of some end goals that would be necessary for peace inside of West Asia.
And now another issue with West Asia, which Friar Steve was mentioning about with the Kurds. I mean, they got that raw deal. And how do you establish an area, where the Kurds could have their own sovereign place?
And if they can have their own sovereign place, how can we guarantee? Uh, how can we guarantee the protection of the territorial integrity and stability of Lebanon and Syria, okay, and Iran and Turkey, uh, all those countries that have Kurds in them? Okay, I forgot to mention Iraq, but of course Iraq has very many Kurds inside of its borders, and those are some of the most active Kurds when it comes to governance, uh, and being close to having a government of their own. So, yeah, it seems to me the measures that are needed for a comprehensive peace deal in 2025 have to include the Kurds as well,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't include the Kurds in here. So I think this particular peace deal needs to have a lot more measures in it and needs to be more comprehensive than it is.
Yes.
Okay, I'm afraid, but I don't want to just simply criticize it. I think this is good as a discussion piece, and it does serve as a basis for adding more measures.
Right.
And perhaps people ought to be doing that. They certainly ought to be talking about a comprehensive deal for peace. because that's what we need, peace in West Asia. And it's just that there need to be more requirements here. I don't think this is a comprehensive set of requirements for peace. It has to do a lot more justice to different parties. There has to be a lot more detail on what would happen to Syria.
Right, because
Syria is a mess right now.
yeah, dividing it up. You have the U.S. wanting a region, and Turkey and Israel.
Okay, let's see if we have any comments on this piece. Let's see, we have Friar Stephen with some comments. Steve Wolfbrand says Chinese food is delicious and very cheap. I agree. I'm not so sure about how cheap it is in some of our restaurants in this country. Lana says, I'm not for these deportations. I prefer a Reagan-esque path to citizenship. I, of course, am not for those deportations either. I think there's no way we're going to deport, 20 million people, 22 million people. That's going to rip apart the whole country. It's going to be a disaster. Steve says, Lana, me too. Robert says, any report of the potential war between Afghanistan and Pakistan? No, I haven't seen anything about that. Robert says, nothing in this article about human rights for everybody. Well, it depends on what you consider to be human rights. What this article is largely about is the right to life and the right to self-determination and the right to be protected from armed force. Those are pretty important, as human rights. Those are the rights that this article, is focusing on. Lana says, hope the Middle East can have peace. When is the last time they had real peace? Prior to World War One. Probably prior to World War One. But then, of course, the Middle East was under the thumb of Turkey, and I don't know about the existence of human rights under the Turkish Empire. Friar Steve says, so far, Syria is doing fine. Not according to the articles I've been reading. There have been a lot of murders, executions in the streets, hostility towards various ethnic groups in Syria. And Iran needs to allow autonomy of the Kurds. Probably, yes. Fry Steve can't compare Israel and Iran. Trump will wage open conflict with only one, Iran. If he tries to wage open conflict, with Iran, I don't think that's a very wise course. Because what what Iran will do is it will destroy the 68 bases the United States has surrounding us. That will be part of the first wave of attacks, and it will also destroy Israel as well. Fry Steve says Turkey is the main issue. Howard says Turkey won't let the Kurdish people have their own country. Well, that's true, but neither will Iran and neither will Iraq. neither will Syria. Of course, right now, Syria can't do much about it because it no longer has, I would say, it no longer has a legitimate government that has sovereignty over all of Syria. Forresty says an independent sovereign is the only way. An independent sovereign Kurdistan is needed. A UN resolution is the starting point. If you could get such a resolution, but you can't get it inside of the UN because Turkey opposes it, Iran opposes it, Iraq opposes it, the new government in Syria is going to oppose it. It would not get enough support. So there's no resolution that's going to go through the UN. Kurdish self-determination under international law is something, that ought to be allowed. But I don't see that the political resources are there to allow that to happen. So, anyway, that was an interesting piece from Jeff Sachs. Let us move along to the next piece because it is getting late. This is a piece by Michael Hudson, the great economists from the University of Missouri at Kansas City. He's a distinguished university professor there, has a chair. And the title of this piece by him is Weaponizing the US Dollar, Can It Work? Trump has promoted a number of plans to make America strong at other countries' expense. Given his, quote, we win, you lose, unquote, motto, some of his plans would produce the opposite effect of what he imagines. That would not be much of a change in U.S. policy, but I suspect that Hudson's law may be peaking under Trump. Every U.S. action attacking other countries tends to backfire and end up costing American policy at least twice as much. We have seen it become normal for foreign countries to be the beneficiaries of U.S. policy aggression. This is most obviously the case for America's trade sanctions against Russia. If the U.S. is not itself the loser, as in cutting the Nord Stream pipeline led to its soaring LNG exports, then its allies will bear the cost. The cost in a few years may be that the United States has lost Europe and NATO as a result by the pressure by European countries to declare their independence from U.S. policy. Well, I think that is a likely consequence, and that Michael's right about that. To speed the parting per European guest, NATO leaders are demanding sanctions against Russia and China, saying that, quote, imports equal dependency, unquote. What follows will be Russia and China counter-sanctions, blocking other raw materials from sale to the EU. In past shows, we've discussed Trump's plan to raise U.S. tariffs and to use them, much like imposing against countries that seek to act in ways that don't dovetail into U.S. foreign policy. There's a lot of pushback on this proposal from vested Republican interests, and ultimately it is Congress that must approve his proposals. So Trump probably threatens too many vested interests to make this a big fight early on in his administration. He'll be busy fighting to clean up the FBI, the CIA, and the military that have been opposing him since 2016. Will Trump's attempt to weaponize the dollar succeed any better than the U.S. trade sanctions? The real wild card may turn out to be Trump's threats to weaponize the dollar. At least that foreign policy sphere is more under control of his executive branch. Along with his drive to control the world's oil trade and key media platforms, Trump wants to be able to hurt other countries. That's his idea of, of, of a negotiation and being transactional. In the weekend edition of the Financial Times, Gillian Tett's article on Trump's proposed, quote, the word Maganomics, unquote, quote Stanford professor Matteo Maggiore, pointing out that national power, quote, touches not just goods but money too. We estimate that the U.S. geoeconomic power relies on financial services, while Chinese power relies on manufacturing. So, along with aiming to control the world's oil and LNG supply, Trump wants to base U.S. power on its financial system. He recently threatened to punish BRIC countries to seek an alternative to the dollar. That strategy is based on countries needing access to U.S. dollars in financial markets, just as they need oil and information technology under U.S. commercial control. The U.S. tried blocking Russia and other countries from the SWIFT bank clearing system, but as usually happens with sanctions, Russia and China have created their own fallback system, so that plan didn't work. The United States got the Bank of England to confiscate Venezuela's gold supply and offer it to the right-wing opposition. That worked, and the EU and United States together confiscated Russia's $300 billion of foreign dollar holdings. That worked, and the EU just gave the interest about $50 billion that had accumulated to Ukraine to help fight Russia. But first, the United States sees all of Ukraine's, all of their monetary reserves as safe keeping, ostensibly to help it pay back the debts it has been running up. I don't think this gold will be made available for Ukraine's rebuilding. It simply reflects a U.S. pattern of asset grabs. The U.S. military grabbed the gold supply of Libya when Gaddafi tried to use it to create an African gold-based alternative to the dollar for central banks to hold. And the U.S. also grabbed Syria's gold supply on its way out leaving only the oil exports as a U.S. trophy of its conquest. It did the same with Afghanistan's gold reserves on the way out. So obviously, the United States anticipates gold returning to a major role in the world's monetary system. To add insult to injury, when U.S. officials finally gave back Iran money that it seized from its reserve, it called this a gift, and Congress attacked the act. The big question is how aggressive U.S. financial policy can work over the long run. Will it drive other countries away? Will it become as self-defeating as other U.S. international game playing? Let's talk about the world's monetary system, how the world's monetary system is likely to evolve in response to American attempt to gain financial control. To me, any such attempt seems impossible to achieve. How can America or any other country or any other nation imagine that it can base its international power on finance alone? All countries can create finance and money, but not all countries can industrialize, or in the case of the United States and Germany, to reindustrialize. The United States has deindustrialized, and its neoliberal privatization policies have loaded down the economy with an enormous overhead of debt service, health insurance costs, and real estate costs. The fire sector, finance, insurance, and real estate, has increased its share of reported GDP, but its income is not really for a, quote, product, unquote, at all. It is a transfer payment from the production and consumption economy to the rentier sector. That makes America's GDP much, quote, emptier, unquote, than that of China and its socialized market economy. When the cost of credit and rents go up, so does GDP. But money today is created on the computer. Any strong and self-sufficient nation or regional grouping can create its own money. They no longer need to base their money and debt on silver and gold bullion. So I think that Trump is living in a past world, especially given the right-wing Republican, quote, hard money crowd pining for the old gold exchange standard, insisting that government money creation is inherently inflationary. Uh, and so then he says, as if bank credit is not at all, I guess that's what makes him a genius. He's able to hold two opposing views at the same time, each with its own logic that contradicts his other view. The United States was very strong in the bygone world when gold was the major asset of central banks. In the wake of World War II, the U.S. was able to monopolize 80% of the monetary gold of the world's central banks. By 1950, when the Korean War broke out, other countries needed dollars after World War II to buy U.S. exports and to pay debts that were denominated in dollars, and they sold their gold to get these dollars. But by 1971, foreign military spending had dissipated that control. The statistics that I compiled for Arthur Andersen in 1967 showed that the entire U.S. balance of payments deficit, that is, the deficit that was draining U.S. gold, was U.S. military spending abroad. So the monetary reserves of central banks came to consist mainly of U.S. Treasury debt that they spent their dollar glut on. That was the change that my book Super Imperialism described in 1972. But U.S. attempts to weaponize finance has led countries not only try to avoid holding more dollars, but to avoid leaving their gold in storage in the United States or Britain. Even Germany has asked for its gold reserves to be sent back to it from the New York Federal Reserve Bank, where much of Europe's central bank gold holdings have been held since the 1930s saw a flood of flight capital to the United States as World War II was looming. Like domestic currency, international money is debt, unless it is a pure asset such as gold. Okay, the U.S. was able to replace gold with U.S. government and private debt, largely because it provided a platform for international payments that seemed to make it, quote, as good as gold, unquote, for international reserves. This does not look like it's going to be a permanent state of international affairs. Anyone can create money, but how do you get it accepted? That's the problem facing the United States today. As U.S. debt grows, how long can it get the dollars accepted by other economies if there's no inherent need for other countries to use it to make payments on their own foreign trade lending and investment? Money is public debt, whether it is issued in paper or electronically. It preserves its value ultimately by being accepted to be paid in taxes. But Trump and the Republicans want to cut taxes. If there's no need to obtain dollars to pay taxes, why hold them? Interesting. The foreign debt tangle. One support for the dollar is the need for global South and other debtor economies to obtain dollars to pay the foreign debts they have run up. But how long can this last? Here's the problem. If they pay the foreign debts that they have run up by following destructive IMF, World Bank, and other Washington consensus policies, they will not have money to invest in their own economic growth. Whose interests will they put first? Those of U.S. bondholders and banks, or those of their own economies? Stated another way, how long will debtor countries agree to remain in a system that has promised to help them grow when all it has done is to leave them further indebted, force them to sell off mineral rights, infrastructure, and public enterprise to raise the money to pay these debts in order to maintain their exchange rates? The system is rigged against them. This problem is being exacerbated today by the dollar's rising exchange rate against many other currencies. Trump's ideas are very muddled in trying to confront this problem. On the one hand, he's talked about wanting a lower exchange rate for the dollar. He believes that competitive devaluation would somehow be able to make U.S. exports more competitive. But the U.S. economy already is too deindustrialized under neoliberalism to rebuild its industrial power in the foreseeable future. So forcing the dollar lower is practical as a means of spurring U.S. exports. Trump has spoken about reducing interest rates to help fuel the stock and bond market boom. For many countries, such as Canada, lowering interest rates leads to a capital outflow to foreign countries paying higher rates. But the U.S. economy is different. QE's lowering of interest rates actually attracted foreign capital, thus raising the dollar's exchange rate. Lowering U.S. interest rates after Paul Volcker's interest rate peak of 20% in 1980 led the biggest bond market rally in history, along with the booming stock market attracting international investors. For starters, anticipation of Trump's policies have been driving it way up. Just since last October, the Canadian dollar's exchange rate has depreciated so that the U.S. dollar buys Canadian dollar and 44 cents, up from Canadian dollar and 34 cents. The price of a euro against the U.S. dollar has fallen from $1.12 to $1.03, and the currencies of global South countries are under heavy pressure as a result of trying to keep current on the U.S. dollar bonds and other loans that are denominated in dollars. So for better or worse, it looks like we're in for a strong dollar this year. And Trump has made it clear he wants to keep the dollar's exorbitant privilege, quote unquote, of being able to simply print money, leaving other countries to keep their currencies from appreciating and hurting their exports by recycling their dollar inflows to keep buying U.S. Treasury IOUs. But these IOUs are soaring as the budget deficit explodes. One related problem is how long easy Federal Reserve credit can keep inflating stock and bond prices, given the rise in arrears and defaults. The largest threat is that of commercial real estate, whose scheduled mortgage payments exceed current rental income as older buildings face rising vacancy rates. Take commercial real estate, 40% occupancy rates in old buildings, and they can't be gentrified for residential use because they don't have open windows for fresh air or good views or neighborhood support. Unlike London's financial city area, Wall Street and other U.S. financial centers and high-rise glass buildings, no amenities, views, mixed-use neighborhoods, or fresh air from opening windows. In the consumer sector, automobile loans, credit card debt, and student loans are falling deeper into arrears. Something has to give, and this will affect not only U.S. financial markets, but the balance of payments as foreign capital flees to safety by leaving the United States. That would be the first time in more than a century when this flight to safety is away from the United States, not to it. The U.S. economy has been redesigned to inflate financial gains, even while deindustrializing by outsourcing its labor force. But what seemed to be U.S. industrial has been replaced by financialized deindustrialization. That means that the drive by BRICS to defend themselves collectively against U.S. hegemony implies really a fundamental broad and split in what is a desirable way to organize economies, opposing finance capitalism as predatory, especially as Trump is trying to push it by imposing sanctions against countries and moving away from dollars. In an addendum, Michael says Gillian Tett, quote, dollar power means tariffs and not the only game in town, unquote. Financial Times, January 11 to 12, 2025, renews her commentary on weaponizing the dollar with a curious comment that Trump's proposed Secretary Besant has also suggested that countries with military protection for America should be forced to buy more dollar debt as a quid pro quo, unquote, by going to these countries and, quote, and say we have these 40 or 50-year military bonds to buy, unquote, he said, citing Japan, NATO members, and Saudi Arabia, unquote. Well, that was a confused series of quotes and unquotes. But surely such large purchase would bid up the price of the dollar, driving down the euro's exchange rate and that of the yen. On the one hand, the Trump administration wants a new version of the 1985 Plaza Accord that, quote, bullied others into reevaluation, unquote. But Trump has announced his aim to lower the dollar's exchange rate, as if this will make its industrial exports more competitive, and to demand that other countries buy more U.S. Treasury securities, bidding up the dollar, unquote. As the Chinese proverb says, he who tries to go two rows at once will get a broken hip joint, unquote. And there's a note to this article. And the note is the Virgilian Tet. That is uh, uh, that uh, uh, um, 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 is Maganomics. Financial Times, January 4th, 2025. So, a very interesting article, I think, posing real dilemmas for Trump. I wonder if he or any of his advisors are going to read this article. I hope they do. They may read the this publication, the Un's Review, because there are a number of right wingers on here who are saying the kinds of things the Trump administration likes. So maybe they'll run across this particular Michael Hudson piece. Uh, I do think it's a very interesting piece and points out certain problems with Trump's proposed policies. I don't know if he'll want to hear about those problems, but he should be able to. Uh, Lana says, love Michael Hudson. Robert says, Trump wants tariffs against Canada and Mexico. I know. But I mean, that's not going to happen because then they're just going to raise tariffs on us. And it's going to be ruinous for everyone. Friar Steve says, good night. Good night, Friar Steve. Thank you for coming. So, we're down to our final topic now, which is West Asia chaos. And I'm going to turn it over to Dee, who will read and comment on the article Trump, Iran, and the Obama strategic blueprint.
Okay.
They forgot to put the T on the blueprint. This article is by Alistair Crook, January 13th, 2025. Okay, and here it is for you, Dee.
Okay, I just have something blocking my screen here. I don't know why it popped. Oh, here it. Oops. Let me just take this down. Okay, now I'm here. Okay.
Okay, good. So here's a photo from I know not where, but it's a Muslim country. It has a lot, of minarets, and also domes for mosques,
Mm-hmm.
and they look like they're very beautiful.
Yes, they do.
So I don't know where this is from, but anyway, take it away, Dee.
Alrighty. In acts of wanton destruction, Netanyahu destroyed the prevailing status quo, which he saw as an American straitjacket. Like a smashed antique clock with its clabbered cogs, ratchet wheels, and innards splayed out from the casing, so the mechanics of the Middle East lie similarly exposed and broken. All the region is in play: Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, and Iran. The
Yeah,
origin,
it's
yep,
all in play. It's amazing chaos.
amazing chaos, and as Netanyahu says that enemies are everywhere. We have to protect ourselves. It's crazy,
Yes, yes, we created the chaos. Now we have to protect ourselves.
right? The original Obama strategic blueprint for containing and balancing the potentially violent energies of West Asia was subsequently handed to Team Biden at the end of the Obama term, and it still clearly bore the Obama imprimatur right up until its collapse after October 7th, 2023. Netanyahu deliberately smashed its mechanics. In acts of wanton destruction, he destroyed the prevailing status quo, which he saw as an American straitjacket preventing the attainment of a greater Israel reaching out to its Grand Valley. Netanyahu resented the American constraints, though by breaking the exact mechanisms. Paradoxically, instead of liberating Israel, he may have unleashed dynamics that will prove far more threatening, i.e., in Syria. The cornerstone to the Obama balanced region was contained in a secret letter sent to Iran's supreme leader in 2014, in which, as the Wall Street Journal relates, Obama proposed to Khamenei joint efforts in Iraq and Syria against the Islamic State, where ISIS controlled territory. This joint action, however, was made contingent on Iran's reaching a nuclear deal with the U.S.
Uh, we had no idea that there was such a contingency,
No,
or that he was trading for more than just uh, 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 stopping the nuclear program.
mm-hmm.
He was trading for getting rid of ISIS.
Yeah,
So first we created ISIS, then he wanted to join with Iran to get rid of ISIS. It's really amazing. Read it.
it is.
So silly.
The letter explicitly acknowledged Iran's equities in Syria. To assuage Iran's concerns about the future of its close ally, President al-Assad, the letter stated that the U.S.'s military operations inside Syria were not targeted at President Assad or his security forces. The Obama understanding with Khamenei, it must be noted, thus implicitly extended to Hezbollah, who were joined with Iran in fighting ISIS in Syria. Quote, among other messages conveyed to Tehran, according to U.S. officials at the time, is that the U.S. military operations in Iraq and Syria aren't aimed at weakening Tehran or its allies. Of course, the Obama undertakings to Iran were lies. Obama had already signed in 2012 or earlier a secret presidential finding, i.e., an instruction for U.S. intelligence support to Syria's rebels in their bid to oust President Assad.
And among the Syrian rebels were ISIS, right?
Yeah. Well, Iran to participate in a nuclear deal, the 2014 letter proposed that its regional equities would be respected and could extend to Lebanon as a geography of international joint education, as exemplified in U.S. envoy Hochstein's mediation of the Lebanese-Syrian maritime borders.
Very interesting.
Mhm. The purpose to this highly complex blueprint was Obama's primordial obsession to arrive at a proto-Palestinian state, albeit as another internationally administered protectorate, supported internationally rather than as a sovereign nation state.
Jeez.
Crazy. Why
How
did Obama? What's
complex.
that?
I mean, how complex, right?
Yeah, it is.
Instead of simply supporting the independence of Palestine, he wants a proto-Palestinian state,
Yeah,
internationally administered protectorate. I mean, what ridiculousness.
it is.
Okay, and outside of the framework of international law, I might add.
Why did Obama insist on a scheme that was such enigma to the Israeli right? and American firsters, it seems that he, with good reason, both distrusted Netanyahu and knew well the latter's determination to prevent any Palestinian state from ever coming to fruition. Obama's Balance of Powers initiative was an attempt, indirectly, to bind Iran and its allies to Obama's Palestinian state concept, deliberately planned as an escalating pressure point on Israel to concede a state. Without intense pressure on Israel, it was clear to Obama that a Palestinian state was a dead letter.
Right. So I certainly agree. Without intense pressure on Israel, it was clear to him a Palestinian state uh, um, um, it was a dead letter. But why didn't he just put intense pressure on Israel? Okay, so that it was no longer, a dead letter.
Hmm.
I mean, why this really complicated thing, which was designed uh, to eventually put intense pressure on Israel anyway?
Yeah,
I mean, it just seems overly complex.
right. Netanyahu had made his intent to see the complete emptying of the Palestinian presence in the West Bank only too evident as far back as the 1970s. This was clear in the interview that he gave to author Max Hastings, who was writing a book on Netanyahu's brother. Netanyahu disliked and distrusted Obama as much as Obama distrusted him. In the wake of 7 October 2023, with the Ring of Fire, 7 wars closing in on Israel, Netanyahu determined to break the straitjacket restraints, and he did. It's not sure, however, whether Obama's highly elaborated structure would ever have worked.
Which sort of reminds me of the public option here in the United States. Obama constantly advocated for a while, for the public option
Hmm.
because he just didn't want to go to Medicare for all ever. So he and his people just grabbed at the public option. Uh,
Hmm.
okay, a highly elaborated and complex structure which would never have worked.
Right. In any case, Netanyahu, by openly defying the White House, decided to override the Obama Biden restraints and to smash the entire Iranian centered project of Obama. The logic of the Israeli serial destruction in the region suggests to Netanyahu, as well as to many Israelis and American Israel firsters, that Iran now is staggeringly vulnerable, in the words of General Jack Keane, because of the loss of Syria, the central node to the axis of resistance.
I don't think it was the
I,
central go to the axis of resistance.
I don't think so either. I
I
think
mean,
that's kind of.
it was at most a conveyor belt, and many people have made the point since the fall of the Syrian government that it's now still very easy to smuggle goods from Iran into Hezbollah.
Yes, it is.
Okay, all that's happened is that they've made that whole process, go underground.
Hmm. Okay, now Axios reports, quote, Iran's recent nuclear advances give President-elect Trump a crucial decision to make in his first months in office: to neutralize the Iranian nuclear threat through negotiations and escalating pressures, or order a military strike. Several Trump advisors privately concede Iran's program is now so far along that this early strategy might no longer be effective. That makes a military option a real possibility. Quote, after Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer met Trump at Mar-a-Lago in November, Dermer came away thinking there was a high likelihood Trump would either support an Israeli military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, something that the Israelis are seriously considering, or even order U.S. strikes. Some top advisors to President Biden have privately argued in recent weeks for striking Iran's nuclear sites before Trump takes office, with Iran and its proxies so badly weakened. They're not weakened. That's crazy. Yet,
Yeah, I think it's crazy also. And I think they'll find it out now in just a relatively few days because the 60-day period of the ceasefire is going to be up. And supposedly Hezbollah is ready to strike back.
and the thing too is Iran just had the showcase where they showed the world what they had.
Yes, they did. And it was very scary.
hmm Yet, this may prove to be wishful thinking. Trump reposted on 7 January 2025 a video on the Truth Social platform featuring Columbia University professor Jeffrey Sachs, in which he discussed the CIA's covert efforts to destabilize Syria's government and to overthrow Assad, the influence of Netanyahu, the Israeli lobby's role in pushing the U.S. into the Iraq War, and Netanyahu's continued attempts to involve the U.S. in a potential conflict with Iran. Sachs explained that the wars in Iraq and Syria were manufactured by Netanyahu and had nothing to do with democracy. Quote, Netanyahu is still trying to get us to fight Iran to this day. He is a deep, dark son of a bitch because he's gotten us into endless wars, Professor Jeffrey Sachs said in the reposted interview. Yep. However, as Barack Ravid notes, others close to Trump expect that he'll seek a deal before considering a strike. When asked about the possibility of war with Iran in November, Trump replied, anything can happen. It's a very volatile situation. Essentially, Iran has two options. Firstly, to signal to the U.S. its readiness to enter into some sort of new nuclear deal with the Trump team, signal its foreign minister already has given, and then to wait on a subsequent successful Trump Putin meeting to reset the global post war security architecture. From that big picture, global deal Tehran might hope to negotiate its own separate big picture accord with the U.S. Of course, this would be optimal. However, Ambassador Chase Freeman has said that although a sustainable peace between the U.S. and Russia theoretically is possible, it will be very difficult to achieve. To which Ray McGovern has added repeatedly that Trump is plenty smart enough to know that he holds a weak hand with regard to Russia in the Eurasian space, and that Trump, the realist, has bigger fish to fry. Is this why Trump and Musk are stirring the geopolitical pot so blatantly? On the one hand, Canada, Greenland, and Panama, as part of the U.S., these may be Trumpian talking points, but Greenland and Canada together could change the leverage calculus with Russia. Is Trump planning to use added leverage via the Arctic to threaten control over Russia's northern borders? It is the shortest flight time for missiles targeted at Russia. And on the other hand, Musk, in parallel, has started a firestorm in Europe with his tweets and his invitation to live stream with Alice Weidel of AfD. Germany is the heart of NATO and the EU. Were Germany to flip away from war with Russia in company with other European flips already in the works, then Trump plausibly could end a major economic burden, troop deployment in the EU, weighing on the U.S. economy. As Colonel Douglas McGregor says, how many times do we have to tell people Americans don't live in Europe? We live in the Western Hemisphere. Musk effectively has lobbied a free speech grenade in the European media hegemony that both lightly controls discourse across the continent and is in the pay of the Anglo deep state.
Yeah, right. It tightly controls discourse across the continent.
Yes. Will this bring the settlement with Russia and the Asian heartland that Trump seeks? We must see. The alternative option for Iran is higher risk and is contingent on the Iranian intelligence assessment of the likelihood of Israel attempting a preemptive strike on Iran. I.e., Iran has the option of a further Operation True Promise, no longer meant to deter, unlike the earlier versions of True Promise, but rather, as Shivan Marandara explains.
Okay, I think it's uh, I think it's Mahendra Raja
Okay.
explains.
Through exposing the improbability of victory and demonstrating the unacceptable cost of conflict to dismantle Israel's illusionary narrative of perpetual victory. In 2003, as Benhadraja has noted, Iran proposed the U.S. a grand bargain. It was rejected by the Bush administration. Can it be revived? Not through nuclear talks, in which Iran has the weaker hand, but by the collaborated use of force. It would be an audacious and big bet. Okay, and this is the second part of the piece. Can Trump save America from itself?
Yes, I can't wait for the third part.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't have it yet, but that should be a doozy. Uh, I'm sure there will be much more about the third option.
Mm-hmm.
In the last part. Okay, and one of the big advantages of Alistair Crook is that he has lots of contacts in the Middle East and West Asia generally, and Iran also. And he's likely to be talking to people there and to finding out uh, far more about the political situation inside of Iran with respect to their sentiment about selecting the third option. There were some indications this week that they were still planning on perhaps using the third option before Trump actually takes over. It's going to be very interesting to see if they do. Here I focused on the paragraph. In this paragraph, Iran has the option of a further Operation True Promise, quote unquote, no longer meant to deter, unlike in earlier versions of True Promise, but rather, Shivan, how did I say it? Mahendra Raja explains, through exposing the, quote, improbability of victory, unquote, and demonstrating the unacceptable cost of conflict to dismantle Israel's illusory narrative of perpetual victory. I was thinking about more concrete results from True Promise 3, like successful destruction of the air power of Israel
Yes.
with, uh, through destroying their air bases with the hypersonic missiles, of Iran.
That's basically we've said that all along. That has to be done.
Yeah, I've also talked about the importance of attacking the West Bank settlements to drive the settlers out of Israel. Okay, and destroy their political power inside of Israel. So that could be another objective of Operation True Promise 3. Okay, I don't know if it will be, but uh, it might be, it should be. I thought this article was very good in analyzing uh, the situation side of West Asia, talking about the contending forces and talking about the current state of play, and identifying that the true promise option is still there for the Iranians. And rather than waiting for Trump, uh, they still could elect to seize the day with that option.
And it's a must. It really is.
Yeah, we've talked about how it strengthens the negotiating hand of Iran in future talks with Trump. And I think the reason why it does is because it graphically illustrates in a way that he'll be able to understand what the true power of Iran is. And I don't think he's really been briefed on that. I mean, I don't think American intelligence forces have a realistic view, okay, of what Iran can do with its hypersonic missiles. Because I think they've resisted the truth about that now for some time. So they're not in a position to convey the truth to Trump. So I think he's still probably operating on science fiction. And that means perhaps that he's not likely to make the right calculation. But one thing that could wake him up is a very successful true promise attack by Iran before he takes office. That would sort of expose him to reality.
Yes, that actually would. Yes, it would.
Yes. So let's see if there are any last minute comments here. Friar Steve says, good night. Evelina says, you partial to Turkey? I guess you're talking to Friar Steve. Oh, yeah, she says, asking Friar. I think Friar has left, so we don't know if he's partial to Turkey.
He's not actually, because I've had conversations with him. He's
Uh,
partial to the Kurds. He is.
that's what I think, too. He's partial to the Kurds. He's partial to the Kurds because the Kurds have a reputation for democracy. And Friar Steve is very much into democracy. Uh, in fact, I don't think that's why he properly appreciates what really has gone on in China. He tends to underestimate the accomplishments of the Chinese because he doesn't see them as democratic.
No, he's still the old thinking.
Yes, he's still old school in that way. Uh, Also, I don't think it's that D and I think that China is democratic in the classical American sense that has never been achieved by any state, except maybe for Costa Rica in Latin America. But uh, uh, the point I'm trying to make here is that uh, there are democratic elements in China. It's far from a dictatorship. They have a complex process of communication up and down the ladder. But just judging from what the Chinese do and how they do it, they do have a system that responds to the needs of their people. And over the last 20 to 30 years, it has been much more responsive to the needs of the Chinese people than our so-called democracy has been to the needs of our people. The oligarchs here have successfully and consistently ignored what most people here want in terms of economic and social progress. And they've gotten away with it. And you don't have such leaders in China because the leaders in China seem to have set up a process by which the people communicate what they want and the leaders give it to them, as suggested by the first article we read here tonight. The Mike Whitney article and the statistics on happiness and satisfaction which the Chinese people have with their government compared to the satisfaction that we have here in our country with our government. It's very striking. So, okay, on that note, should we close for tonight, Dee? Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I just agree with you with China, and we've spoken about China before over the course, of the years, and we've seen that what the caring of the different communities and wanting to uplift the different communities and really look into what different communities need.
The reason why we've not spent a lot of time on China, of course, is because of the need to spend a lot of time on the wars in Ukraine and in West Asia.
Yes.
It's just, taken us away from a broader view of what is, going on in the world. We do give some attention to that broader view, but we haven't focused much on the internals of China. But we did that tonight in our first piece, I think.
Yes, that was great. That was a good piece, yes.
Yes, that was.
Okay, so I guess we could say good night. Good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Okay, good night, Dee. Thank you again for joining me tonight
Yeah, thank you for having me.
and for sharing in the analysis and commentary.
You're welcome.
Okay,
And we'll say good night to everybody, Evelina and Robert, Lana.
Friar Steve, except he's probably already left.
Yeah, and Steve Wolfbrandt.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Yeah,
Alrighty.
we had a lot of comments tonight.
Yes, we did. That was great. It's a great conversation.
Yes, that was good. Really good.
Okay, so let me chow out, right?
Okay, I'll be back on Thursday at 8 p.m. Okay, I expect, are you going to be back tomorrow night, Dee?
Yes, I'm going to have a show tomorrow night.
Okay, I think I'm going to join you tomorrow night for your show.
That sounds great. Good, because I like having somebody with me.
And of course, I'll join you on Thursday at 9 o'clock. Okay, as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, I take it you will have a show, not just on Wednesday, but on Thursday also.
Yes, Wednesday and Thursday. Yeah, usually I start at 9:15.
Yes, I know.
Yes, it makes it easier.
Okay, do you plan Friday also?
I haven't thought about Friday, but we can see.
Okay.
Alrighty. So good night, everyone.
Okay, thank you again, Dee. And good night, everyone.
I wanted to show you something.
Hang on a second, honey. I got